Now, another one of the key issues in the King's speech today was the emphasis on criminal justice reform, as it was announced that killers convicted of the most horrific murders should expect whole-life orders, as Rishi Sunak's government attempts to beef up its law and order policies. The government also wants prolific killers like nurse Lucy Letby, who refused to attend her sentencing hearing, to be forced to face their victims' families in the dock. Others like Jordan McSweeney and Thomas Cashman can also expect to serve their day of sentencing. Well, I'm joined now by former Metropolitan Police Detective Peter Bleksley, my favourite common sense copper. It's always a pleasure to have you on GB News, Peter. So you've probably heard this many, many times before over the years, haven't you? Prime ministers, politicians talking tough on crime. Do you believe Rishi will actually do it?
Well, of course, the Tory party built their reputation over many decades of being the party of law and order. And back when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister, that was a claim I think that they could actually hang on to and say, yes, we are. That mantle has slipped a lot in recent years. But I'm pleased to hear today that there will be another look at this whole life orders and who will be eligible for them. And we hear that it's going to be murderers with a particular sadistic element to the killing or a sexual element. Well, that, of course, would mean that McSweeney, who unbelievably had his sentence cut this week, would probably have got a full life term. So that has to be welcomed, together with people like Colin Pitchfork, a name that's been in the news recently. He raped and murdered 2 teenage girls in separate incidents, and he has been in front of the parole board. I'm sure that if this legislation finds its way onto the statute book, then killers like Pitchfork will serve a whole life term, and I'd be very supportive of that.
And Peter, plans as well, promises to clamp down on grooming gangs. A lot of people watching this show will think that is long, long overdue.
It most certainly is. And there's an awful lot of senior police officers who need to hang their heads in shame because they were too scared to confront the uncomfortable truth. They were too timid and frightened to be accused of racism because they would not go into particular communities that had a penchant for this revolting, disgusting behaviour whereby they plied young girls with drink, drugs, groomed them, raped them, sexually abused them for years and got away with it for years, sometimes forever. So beefing up the legislation, having a political will that will put a size 11 up the rear end of any senior police officer who can't be courageous enough to confront the uncomfortable truth has to be a good thing.
But doesn't that bring us to another problem that we face in policing, or at least in the College of Policing, Peter? We talk about this often, and that is it's OK to talk tough. It's OK to say let's put a boot through a door or worse. But the fact of the matter is it seems that the policing establishment has been consumed by wokery, the kind of wokery, in fact, that means that cops and lawmakers are too afraid to be called racist to actually do any of this stuff, and they're not actually putting it down on the beats. Whose fault is that? Is it the bobbies, or is it the orders coming down to them from the top brass?
Well, Martin the Carpenter Daubney has just hit the nail firmly on the head. There is a liberal, woke, kind of pseudo-intellectual attitude that pollutes so much of senior policing. And that, of course, filters down, because any other cop who aspires to be senior in policing has to buy in to the whole mantra, to the whole mindset. And of course, these senior police officers are so disconnected from the front line, from the rough and tumble of response policing and other frontline specialisms, that they live quite clearly in cloud cuckoo land. And that the public are not daft. The public know this, they realise it, and they want policing to be robust, to be professional, to be firm, and so that we try and stem this ever-increasing tide of lawlessness, which is just irritating so many people and creating so many victims of crime.
And Peter, as I have you here, of course, all eyes now are on Armistice Day, the planned protest, the Palestinian mob turning up on Saturday. Astonishing scenes last night, the Metropolitan Police asking them to reconsider, asking them nicely to postpone. If you were in control, what would you do this Saturday?
Kindly bear with me because I may give you an answer that might surprise you somewhat. Sir Mark Rowley could not have handled this any worse. I actually would have allowed the march to take place. As unsavoury as that may seem, it is scheduled to start after the 11th hour on the 11th day of the 11th month. It's not going anywhere near Whitehall, the Cenotaph, Parliament Square, and I would rather have a mob where I knew they were going to be, where I could police them properly. If this march does get suspended, postponed, banned, whatever it may be, we quite potentially would be confronted in London with mobs of people and the police having no idea whatsoever where they're going to go. Rowley has managed to cheese everybody off here. He's cheesed off the far right, who have had a notorious leader call people to arms on Saturday. He's cheesed off the protesters. And quite frankly, this is a dreadful situation now. If he goes to the Home Secretary and asks her to ban this march, then I have got serious concerns as to what might happen in London on Saturday.
OK, Peter Bleksley, thank you once again for speaking common sense. If we had people like you in control, mate, we might have more than half a fighting chance.